All right, so today we're diving into women and AI.
Oh, yeah.
You sent over a ton of reports and studies.
Yeah, really fascinating collection.
Yeah, and including this 2024 UNESCO study on AI and gender,
Hmm.
along with some stuff from the World Economic Forum,
Right.
OECD.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah, I mean, so much.
It's really interesting stuff.
One of the things that jumped out at me right away was this whole idea of the participation gap.
Yeah.
And you see that so clearly in the UNESCO report.
Yeah.
Just looking at the numbers, women make up only 29% of researchers in science and development in general.
Wow.
But when you narrow that down to AI research,
Yeah.
it's only 12%.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
That's a massive difference.
Yeah, and that's just the research positions.
Right.
When you look at AI startups, which, people think of as being more progressive,
Yeah.
only 18% of C-suite positions are held by women.
That's so interesting.
It's a problem.
Yeah, and why should our listener care about this?
Well, because if the people who are designing and developing these AI systems are mostly men,
Yeah.
how can we be sure that those systems are really going to meet everyone's needs?
Right. Are they going to be able to step outside of their own perspective and really consider everyone's needs and experiences?
Yeah, it's a big question.
It's a big question. And, the report highlights some pretty unsettling examples of how this lack of diversity leads to biased AI.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So let's get into that.
Okay.
Let's start with hiring algorithms.
Okay, so the Amazon case is a perfect example of this.
Well, yeah.
They had this recruiting tool,
Right.
and it was trained on 10 years of resumes,
Okay.
mostly from men.
Right.
And what happened was the system basically learned that men were better candidates.
Wow.
And started penalizing resumes that even mentioned women's colleges.
It's it's baking in that bias from the very beginning.
Exactly.
It's inheriting it.
Yeah, and it's amplifying it.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how many other systems are out there that are doing similar things that we just don't even know about.
There's got to be a lot.
Yeah, and then there was that case with Guild,
Oh, yeah.
which was an online tech hiring platform.
Right.
And their algorithm was using social data.
Like your online activity?
Yeah, and it was found to be biased against women.
Yeah, it's tough because how do you make sure that these algorithms
Right.
aren't unfairly penalizing women
Yeah.
who maybe, have different online behavior because of societal expectations or caregiving responsibilities or things like that?
It's so nuanced.
It is. It's very nuanced.
Hard to know how to account for all of that.
You need a much more nuanced approach to how you collect the data and analyze it.
Right.
It can't just be, you feed the data into the system.
Oh, wait, and expect it to magically
Right.
come up with fair and unbiased results.
Exactly. You need to be really intentional about it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to another area
Okay.
where AI bias is showing up in a big way.
Hmm.
Facial recognition technology. The report mentions that these systems often misidentify women or perform worse on women's faces.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It really comes down to the data sets
Okay.
that they use to train these systems.
So if they're primarily using images of men.
Yeah. Or if the images are labeled in a way that reflects gender stereotypes,
Right.
then the AI is going to learn those biases.
So it's not that the AI is inherently sexist.
Right.
It's that it's learning from data.
Exactly. It's inheriting the biases from the data.
And this has real-world consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
It can lead to misidentification,
Right.
exclusion from services,
Mhm.
even false arrests.
It's a huge problem.
And with facial recognition being used more and more in surveillance,
Yeah.
this is really worrying
It is, because it could disproportionately impact women.
in terms of their privacy and their safety.
Exactly.
And, it's just another example of how technology doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
It's operating within existing power structures and social norms.
And it can either reinforce those norms or challenge them.
That's such a good point. Okay, the report also delves into healthcare inequities.
Mm-hmm.
And one fact that really stood out to me was that women were excluded from clinical trials in the U.S. until 1993.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really striking example of how deep this bias runs.
Right, and it has huge implications for AI in healthcare.
Absolutely.
I mean, that means that a lot of the AI systems that are being used in healthcare today
Yeah.
are trained on data that's mostly from men.
Right.
So how can we trust those systems to accurately diagnose and treat women
Yeah, it's a really important question.
if they're not learning from data that represents our bodies?
Yeah, we need more research in this area. We
Absolutely.
need to develop AI systems that are specifically designed to address women's health needs.
Yeah, and we need to be proactive about this, not
Right.
reactive. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about generative AI,
Okay.
like Chat GPT.
Yeah,
It seems like there's a whole other set of considerations
it is. It's a whole new world.
when it comes to gender and ethics.
Yet, generative AI has the potential to both challenge and reinforce gender stereotypes.
It's like a double-edged sword.
It is.
Like, imagine AI systems that could generate stories with strong, diverse female characters,
Yeah,
or educational materials that break down gender stereotypes.
that would be amazing.
That would be so powerful.
It would.
But then on the other hand,
Yeah,
there's also the risk that generative AI could be used to create and spread harmful content.
right?
The report gave the example of that Lensa app
Oh, yeah.
that was generating sexualized images of women
Right, without their consent.
without their consent and replicating racist and sexist stereotypes.
There's a big problem.
Yeah, and as generative AI gets more sophisticated and accessible,
It's only going to get more complicated.
these issues are just going to become more complex.
We need to be having these conversations now.
Absolutely. Okay, so clearly a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think we should move on to talking about some of the solutions that the report offers in the next segment.
Okay, sounds good. It is a multifaceted challenge.
Yeah, but thankfully the report does offer some solutions.
Yeah.
So,
One that I thought was really interesting was this idea of incorporating a gender perspective in AI policies.
okay, so we've kind of talked about that theoretically, but like, what does that actually look like in practice?
So it's about going beyond just, general statements about fairness and non-discrimination,
Right.
and actually putting concrete measures in place to promote gender equality
Okay.
in how AI is developed and used.
Are there any like countries or organizations that are doing this well?
Yeah, the report highlights Ireland's national AI strategy.
Okay.
That's a good example.
What are they doing?
They have a whole section in there on women's participation in AI,
Oh, wow.
and it outlines a bunch of initiatives to attract and retain women in the field.
So they're actually putting resources and actions behind it.
Yeah, they're not just talking about it, they're actually doing something. That's great to hear.
Yeah, and it's not just governments.
Right.
Corporations have a big role to play too.
Yeah, I've seen some companies are starting to adopt these AI ethics principles.
Yeah.
But how do we make sure they're actually putting them into practice?
That's the million-dollar question.
It seems like there's a lot of potential for greenwashing. Just saying the right things without actually changing their behavior.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems is the lack of transparency.
What do you mean?
A lot of companies don't want to share data about like the diversity of their AI teams
Right.
or how they're addressing bias in their algorithms.
So it's kind of a black box,
Yeah, we know there's a problem
but we don't really know how big it is
or what they're doing about it.
or how to hold them accountable.
Right.
So what can we do about that?
The report really stresses the need for better data collection
Okay.
and reporting.
Like what kind of data?
So we need standardized metrics to track gender representation across the entire AI life cycle. So from education to employment to leadership positions.
Yeah, the whole thing.
But it's not just about the numbers, right?
Right.
We also need to understand the quality of women's experiences in these roles.
Absolutely.
Like, are they being given equal opportunities?
Are they facing discrimination?
Are they being harassed?
Yeah, we need to know what's actually happening.
So we need qualitative data as well
Exactly. We need to understand the lived experiences of women in AI.
to really get a sense of this systemic barriers.
Yeah, the things that are holding them back.
So it's not just about getting women in the door.
Right.
It's about making sure that they can actually thrive.
And reach their full potential.
Exactly. And that's where supporting women-led initiatives is so important.
Oh, absolutely.
There are so many amazing organizations out there that are doing incredible work to address the root causes of this inequality.
Yeah, one that I thought was really cool was this Incubating Feminist AI project.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that.
So they're offering grants to support the development of feminist AI technologies.
Feminist AI technologies, what does that even mean?
So it's basically about designing AI systems that prioritize equality and inclusion
Okay.
from the very beginning.
I like that.
It's about challenging those traditional power dynamics in tech
Yeah.
and creating solutions that benefit everyone, not just a select few.
Are there any real-world examples of this?
Yeah, the report mentions this software called Emir AI. It's
Okay.
open source,
Okay.
and it's being used by criminal courts in Argentina and Mexico
Wow.
to help them collect and analyze data on gender-based violence.
That's really powerful.
It is, and it really shows that women aren't just victims of AI bias.
Right?
They're also leading the charge in developing ethical and inclusive AI solutions.
That's so important to remember.
It is.
Okay, so what other recommendations from the report really resonated with you?
One that I thought was interesting was the call for like learning communities
Okay.
and peer-to-peer networks
Yeah.
focused on gender and diversity in AI.
So, like creating spaces where women can connect,
Yeah. Share their experiences, learn from each other.
build a support system.
Exactly. Amplify each other's voices.
I love that.
Yeah. And these communities aren't just for women who are already in tech.
Right?
They're open to anyone who's interested in learning about ethical AI.
I think that's so important
It is.
because these conversations about gender and AI,
Yeah.
they're not just happening in Silicon Valley.
Right. They're happening
They're
everywhere.
happening at the UN,
In governments.
in universities.
In our homes.
It's a societal issue.
It affects all of us.
And the more we talk about it,
The more awareness we raise.
the more likely we are to create real change.
Exactly.
But it's also important to remember that these conversations need to be intersectional.
Absolutely.
We can't just focus on gender in isolation.
Right.
We need to consider how it intersects with other forms of identity.
Like race and class and disability.
Yeah, because the experiences of women in AI aren't monolithic.
Right. A black woman in tech might face very different challenges than a white woman.
Exactly, and we need to be mindful of those nuances.
An intersectional approach is essential
Yeah.
if we want to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to benefit from these advancements.
So ultimately, AI, like any technology, is a tool. It can be used for good or for bad, and it's up to us to decide how we want to shape its future.
And that choice starts with each of us.
Yeah.
It starts with asking questions,
Yeah.
challenging assumptions.
Holding people accountable.
Exactly. Demanding better from the people and institutions that are creating and using AI.
You know, speaking of accountability,
Yeah.
the report mentions these things called AI impact assessments.
Oh, yeah. Those are really important.
Can you explain a little bit more about what those are and how they work?
So essentially, they're a way to evaluate the potential consequences of an AI system before it's released.
Okay.
Like you're looking at the data that's being used to train the system, the potential for bias,
Right.
potential impact on different groups of people.
So it's like a risk assessment for AI.
Yeah, but with a focus on social impact.
Are there any examples of organizations that are using these assessments effectively?
Yeah, the report highlights this framework called HUDARIA,
Okay.
which stands for Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law Impact Assessment.
For AI systems.
Yeah, it's a really comprehensive approach.
It sounds like it.
It goes beyond just bias and discrimination
Okay.
and looks at the broader impact of AI on human rights.
That's encouraging. It sounds like we're starting to develop these more sophisticated tools
Yeah,
to grapple with these really complex ethical challenges.
it's a good sign.
But we also need to be realistic about the challenges involved in implementing these assessments.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like what kind of challenges?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that there's no, like, universally agreed upon standard
Right.
for what an AI impact assessment should look like.
So different organizations are using different methodologies.
Exactly, which makes it really hard to compare results.
And ensure consistency.
Yeah, it's kind of the Wild West out there right now.
So we need more clarity
And consistency.
in how these assessments are being done.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's hard to know how effective they really are.
And that's where stronger regulatory frameworks come in.
Absolutely. The report really emphasizes the need for governments to step up
Right.
and create a level playing field.
That incentivizes ethical behavior.
It can't just be about self-regulation.
Right.
We need clear guidelines and consequences for companies that are doing unethical things.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It is.
Individuals need to be aware and engaged.
Right.
Companies need to be transparent and accountable, and governments need to create a regulatory environment that promotes ethical AI development.
That's a great summary.
It feels like we're at a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
The technology is advancing so rapidly.
And we have a choice to make.
Do we want to let AI exacerbate existing inequalities?
Or do we want to use it as a force for positive change?
And I think this report offers a roadmap
It does.
for how we can choose the latter path.
Yeah. It's a call to action for all of us.
To engage in these conversations.
To demand better.
To work together.
To create a future where this technology benefits all of humanity.
It does feel like we've talked about a lot, but there's still so much we don't know about how AI is going to impact gender dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely.
especially as it keeps evolving.
Yeah, and the report acknowledges that too.
Yeah.
They talk about the limitations of the data we have now and how we need more research
Right.
to really understand this complex relationship between AI and gender equality.
We've focused a lot on, the existing inequalities.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the potential for AI to actually create new opportunities for women,
Yeah.
especially in areas like entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Like, could AI help to level the playing field in some ways?
Well, the report talks about how we need more investment in STEM education for girls and women,
Okay.
so they have the skills they need.
To thrive in
Yeah.
an AI-driven world.
Right. And it also emphasizes the need to support female entrepreneurs in the AI sector.
So not just getting women into tech jobs,
Right.
but making sure they have the resources and funding
To build their own businesses.
to create their own AI companies.
Exactly.
Are there organizations that are doing that already?
Yeah, there are actually. The report mentions Wixchange
Okay.
and the Inter-American Development Bank.
What are they doing?
They're doing some really cool work,
Okay.
providing mentorship training funding opportunities with
Yeah.
STEMpreneurs in Latin America and the Caribbean.
That's amazing.
It is. It's really inspiring to see.
Yeah, it seems like there's this growing movement
Yeah,
to make the AI ecosystem more inclusive.
it's definitely gaining momentum.
But how do we make sure that this momentum continues?
Well, one of the key recommendations in the report is ongoing monitoring and evaluation of AI systems.
So it's not enough to just design them with good intentions.
Right.
We have to track their impact,
Over time
see how they're actually playing out in the real world.
and make adjustments as needed.
So who's responsible for doing this monitoring and evaluation?
It's a shared responsibility.
Okay.
Companies that are developing these systems obviously have a duty to do their due diligence,
Right.
but governments and independent organizations also have a role to play
In setting standards.
in holding companies accountable.
And it's crucial that this feedback loop includes the voices of women
Absolutely.
and other marginalized groups
And need to be active participants,
in shaping how AI is developed and used.
not just passive recipients.
This all comes back to our main point.
Yeah.
Technology is not neutral.
It reflects the values of the people who create it.
So if we want AI that's ethical and inclusive,
We need to make sure that those values represent the full diversity of human experience.
and I think that's a really powerful message to end on.
It is.
So to our listener, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of women and ethical AI.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We encourage you to keep exploring these issues, asking questions, and engaging in these really crucial conversations that are shaping our future.
It's an important topic for all of us.